Hey everyone, it's Rob of the Actors Workshop, and you are in the Abyss 2001 edition. As we are getting into the 2000s now, we are starting to see the list dwindle a little bit. There are still some good movies, but not quite the quality that we once were seeing, where we were having 18 to 25 movies a day. There's still some creativity, but not like it used to be. There's still some pretty good cast, but not like it used to be. And so these videos will start to shorten up, and I don't know if that's a bad thing or I don't know if that's a good thing, but hopefully I can still give you a list of some movies to check out. Movies you will not see me talk about, and maybe you'll make your list. And that's kind of cool. I'm starting to see lists now of movies that you guys enjoy that I have seen once, and then I'm good moving on. You know, we talked about Memento last night, and I've seen it, and then I move on. But for others, they really like those kinds of movies, and that's what makes this such a great thing. Is maybe I need to go revisit it and see if I enjoy it more the second time. But it's also about introducing you guys once again to movies that maybe you haven't seen, or if you have seen, that you need to finally watch. Anyways, movies you will not see: Ocean's 11. It's fine. I just like the original with the Rat Pack, and I'll take the original over it any day of the week. Pearl Harbor, you know me, I love history. I just think that they did this movie completely wrong. I don't think it was cast well. I don't think it was shot well. And they focused too much on the guys and not enough on the history, in my opinion. My Big Fat Greek Wedding, not because I don't like it. It's just, I don't even think I own it. But I do enjoy it and appreciate it more than I originally did. Zoolander, it's good. It's an overrated comedy, in my opinion. I think people think it's funnier than it really is. But, that's once again my opinion. You may love it. Mulholland Drive, interesting film, and I don't own it. It's a Criterion, and it's on my short list, but I haven't quite gotten to the point of getting it yet. And the reason for that is, as you all know, Criterions, even when they're on sale, are pretty expensive. So I have a list of Criterions I'd rather buy before that. I will eventually probably get around to getting it, but at this point I don't own it. So the movies that I do own, I will show you. Lord of the Rings, this was one of those ones that teetered on, do I talk about it or not? I enjoy it. I just don't necessarily love it like some. And then there's some that hate them, right? And I actually know some that get that extended version they put out, which is like 5 hours long. Is ridiculous. No, thank you. This is just fine. It's long enough, but it's an interesting story. The Tolkien stuff is great. I like the scenery and the clothing and the shots, and I think it's really well made. I just kind of feel like it's kind of like today's modern day Star Wars in a sense, with the 3 trilogy. And I know it's not really that way, but it kind of gives me that feel to it. And as a standalone, it's fine, but it's not something that I necessarily will go to. Oh, I feel like watching Lord of the Rings. You know what I mean? It's kind of, to me, like a mood film. I have to be in the mood to watch it because they are long and there's a lot to them, but still worth a watch if you haven't seen them. Next up, Tom Cruise, Cameron Diaz, Kurt Russell, Penelope Cruz, Vanilla Sky. Yeah, I don't get this. Meaning it took a while for me to really. I saw this in the theater, had no clue. See it a few more times, have no clue. And I think the last time I saw it a couple years ago, I really started to understand how this movie played out. And it's interesting. It's not great. It's good, but it's interesting. It's actually a remake of a Spanish film that Penelope Cruz starred in as well. And then they remade it with Tom Cruise and her. And I think this is the time when they were together, etc. And like I said, there's some good acting in it, but the story really makes you sit there and go, what am I missing? But once you start to figure it out, it makes it kind of fun to, oh yeah, that makes sense kind of thing. You know what I mean? But you got to watch it like 15 times to get there. Next up, a pretty decent thriller. The score, it's more about the cast for me: De Niro, Brando, Edward Norton. And to me, this is like kind of the last run of those De Niro like action thriller type movies. But because of the cast and that movie formula that De Niro and Brando had, it kind of makes it fun to see them all together with Edward Norton in his heyday, and makes for a pretty fun film. Next up, another thriller: Michael Douglas, Brittany Murphy, Sean Bean. It kind of has, as some say, a Hitchcock feel to it. Kind of in that vein. Michael Douglas's daughter's kidnapped, and here we go. It's like I said, it's a thriller, and it's the formula Michael Douglas is now at this point. Before we talked about like Basic Instinct and Disclosure and Fatal Attraction. And then all of a sudden, as he kind of aged out of that a little bit, he started doing stuff like we've spoken about the last few episodes, The Game, A Perfect Murder, and now this. And he just knows what he does, and he does it well. And that's really what acting is about, understanding who and what you are, and then marketing on that. And when it worked, when he was doing those kind of, sex thriller type films, that's what worked for him. Now he's just doing kind of the mystery thriller type films, and now those are working for him. And he's consistently really good, and he's one I talk about quite a bit. And this is another one that I enjoy. All right, shifting gears a little bit, kind of a romantic comedy with a great cast: Billy Crystal, Julia Roberts, Catherine Zeta-Jones, John Cusack, America's Sweethearts. John Cusack and Catherine Zeta-Jones are married. They're also movie stars who work together. They're America's Sweethearts. Julia Roberts plays Catherine Zeta-Jones' assistant, but also her sister. Billy Crystal's kind of like their publicist manager type person. And then you have some good, she's now dating Hank Azaria, and he does a good job. And Hank Azaria is pretty consistent, and he kind of plays those character type roles, but keeping it honest as Hank Azaria. And so, you see him, he's got some pretty good funny comedy chops. I know we talk about other people having some pretty good comedy chops. He's pretty good with them. And then at the end, you have the crazy director, who, of course, is played by Christopher Walken. Who else would play a crazy director than Chris Walken? And it makes for a pretty good, fun, romantic comedy. Another comedy, Super Troopers, done by a group of guys called Broken Lizard, or that's what they call themselves. It's these guys. It's a good fun comedy. It's basically a shenanigans type movie, and they actually use the word shenanigans in the movie, and there's a whole bit about it. It's pretty funny. But their captain is Brian Cox, who we talked about way earlier as the original Hannibal Lecter in Manhunter. And so you have him as their captain, and these screwballs, and it's all the stuff they have to deal with, and like I said, all the shenanigans and stuff. And they actually did a sequel to this just a couple years ago, several years after this, and I thought they did a really good job. You had Rob Lowe once again, who's just great in these comedies, and you put him in with these guys, and it makes for another good comedy. So I was pleasantly surprised with the sequel, but this original is really good to me, really funny. Heath Ledger, A Knight's Tale. I love the originality of this movie, where you take the medieval times of jousting and knights and all those things, and then you tie it in with kind of a modern feel with the music and some of the other aspects. So you have the modern meets the medieval, and they make it work. And it's a good, fun story. Paul Bettany does a great job. He's one of those actors who consistently does Paul Bettany. And I know for some, he seems to kind of be just bland, but I think he just does him. And if that's how he is, that's how he is. But I think he works consistently, and I enjoy a lot of his films. And he does a really good job in this, as does Rufus Sewell, however you pronounce it, as the villain. He's just one of those villains that he has those piercing eyes, and when you see him, you just don't like him. You root for Heath Ledger, who is likable, right? And you don't like the other guy who's not likable. It's perfect casting, and they do a great job bouncing off each other. And this is, like I said, quietly a movie I enjoy quite a bit. And if it's on TV, I'll watch it. It's pretty strong, and it's a lot of fun. And if you have not seen it, you need to check it out. And if you have, watch it again. Johnny Depp, Heather Graham, From Hell, story of Jack the Ripper. It's one version of a story, and I know there's a lot of different versions and thoughts and all those kinds of things. I know that I was watching a documentary, a while back where they were saying that, they believe that Jack the Ripper actually did kill people in the United States. And you know what? If there was a time to get away with murder, it was the 1890s, right? There was no fingerprints, no DNA. You basically had to be caught in the act. So it was the perfect time for Jack the Ripper. And that's why all these years later we have no idea. We have theories, but no idea. I mean, some people believe that he was possibly H.H. Holmes, who was the original serial killer of America. And I know there was a movie in the works starring Leonardo DiCaprio as him. I don't know if that's still a possibility or not, but there are people that believe that it could have been him. Other people say no. I love that kind of stuff. But this is one theory, and I think they do a really good job. Johnny Depp is the detective, being Johnny Depp, and then Heather Graham is one of the prostitutes. And Heather Graham's another one of these actors who just does Heather Graham, and it doesn't matter if it's Boogie Nights, it's this, it's The Hangover, it's Swingers, whatever. She's Heather Graham. And we were talking last night in class of what it takes to be successful, and it's creativity and risk taking. And Heather Graham takes a lot of risks in her work. She's not afraid to put herself out there, and it makes for a strong actress, and she does a great job, and she's really good in this. All right, next up, another romantic comedy, Serendipity. John Cusack, Kate Beckinsale, Jeremy Piven, Molly Shannon. It's a pretty good cast. Not a love of Molly Shannon. I think Kate Beckinsale's better. But, the banter between Cusack and Jeremy Piven, just like we talked about in Grosse Pointe Blank, is really strong. And the story's great and unique. This was actually a movie I got for free when I bought another DVD a while back. And I pleasantly was surprised. What a great find, and a really enjoyable movie. And seeing all the scenery and sights of New York while he's trying to find this girl and while she's trying to find him. And like I said, it makes for a good, fun, romantic comedy. And this is kind of the last of the John Cusack formula. There's other movies coming up that I'll talk about with him, but it kind of changes in the way that he starts doing movies. Kind of like we just talked about Michael Douglas. But this was like the last of those like romantic comedy he was in. And we just talked about him with American Sweetheart, season 2 of him in 2001. But I really enjoyed this film, and if you haven't seen it, you need to check it out. All right, next up, Mark Wahlberg, Jennifer Aniston, Rockstar. This is loosely based off of Tim Ripper Owens, who was a singer of a tribute band of Judas Priest, and auditioned for the lead singer job, and ended up becoming the lead singer of Judas Priest, making his dream come true. And they made this movie based off of his story. And originally Judas Priest was a part of it. They were going to call it Metal God, which is a Judas Priest song. But then the more they Hollywoodized it, the more Judas Priest kind of moved away from it. So they kind of went with loosely based off of Tim's story, called it Rockstar. And basically Wahlberg is a singer of a tribute band called Steel Dragon, and gets to audition for them and becomes the lead singer, and that's the movie. And Jennifer Aniston, just like we talked about with Heather Graham, does a really good job of being Jennifer Aniston. Now, here she's kind of a rock star's girlfriend, but she's still the cute Jennifer Aniston. She's just a little bit more on the wild side, which is kind of cool, and it's kind of different for her, but she's still being her, and she consistently does her. She understands her product and sells that, and she does a great job with Wahlberg in this, and it's a good movie. And if you are a fan of Judas Priest, you'll appreciate it even more. And I kind of wish, kind of the way Bohemian Rhapsody was done, or Ray, or some of these movies where the bands or the singers were involved. I wish Hollywood would have kept it a little bit more true to form, so we could have gotten more of a feel of that true story. But in its own right, it's a pretty fun story, and you get some pretty good music on top of it. All right, a runner-up for 2001, Monsters, Inc. I don't talk about the animated films too often, but for several reasons, this one is on the list, and it's a runner-up. Number one, it's the first movie we took Emma to, and, when she was like 3 years old, we were in Palm Springs, it was hot, we went to a movie, and Monsters, Inc. was the one we saw. Number two, what a creative story, right? Where the monsters and the doors, and, every kid thinks about the monsters in his closet, when we were all young, and how we had nightmares about it and stuff, and to be able to make that work and come alive in an animated film is pretty crazy. And then the cast, John Goodman as Sully, Billy Crystal as Mike, Steve Buscemi as Randall, and the rest. It's really a creative, unique, fun story with great banter from great actors. And even though we hear their voice, we see them. And it's funny because whenever I would be watching a movie with John Goodman or Billy Crystal, when the kids were little, they'd be like, "Oh my God, that's Sully! Oh my God, that's Mike!" Like that's how recognizable their voices are. That they are so true to themselves that the kids hear the voice and know who they are from an animated film. And to me, this is the best Pixar film. I just think it's just overall really well done. And like I said, it has a little bit more personal feeling to me, thinking back to my firstborn seeing her first movie, and so it was, like I said, pretty easy for me to go with Monsters Inc. In 2001. But the overall winner in 2001 is the man Denzel Washington, Training Day. Ethan Hawke, probably in his best film, which helps a lot when you're working with one of the greatest of all time. Scott Glenn. It's a great, unique story, and it's funny because I have an interview with Denzel, and he talks about how they're interviewing him and they're asking about how hard it was to do this role, and he's actually like, "Well, truth be told, I'm more like this guy than I am my other roles. This was easy for him. He just kind of put on the clothes and went to work." And we've talked about before, I really enjoy movies that are filmed over just the day, and this starts in the morning and goes through the night, and it's just that day. It's his training day. And once again, it's a fun, unique story, and the acting's phenomenal. The group of guys playing cards, the gangbangers or whatever, and then the bathtub scene with them and all that, the intensity and the believability and the acting is so strong and so good and so powerful, and the way Ethan Hawke has to deal with him is phenomenal. And then of course all the stuff with Denzel and all of his corruption and stuff, he just does a great job as the rogue cop or the vigilante cop or however you want to explain it, and it just makes for a really good film. And so for 2001, I'm going with Training Day. On the music side, just a couple real quick. First one I want to show you is Judas Priest Demolition. And the only reason I'm really showing this to you is because we just talked about Rockstar and Tim Ripper Owens. This is the second one Ripper did with Judas Priest. So I wanted to point it out that at the time the movie's coming out, he is still putting out a record with Judas Priest. He did two. He did Jugulator and Demolition, and then did 2 live records with them as well before the original lead singer came back, and then Tim moved on to Ice Earth for a couple albums, and now he does his own stuff. But I wanted to point this out because it's a solid second record. A lot of people don't love these. I kind of like it because they changed their style. They kind of go with Tim's style a little bit more, which we've talked about numerous times. You have to use what you get and not try to make somebody get what you are wanting them to use. And Priest kind of became a heavier band with Tim. He has that kind of power in his voice, but at the same time sounded like the original singer, so he could hit those high notes of the old song. So a really good, second album in my opinion. Sabotage, Poets and Madmen. This is their last record of Sabotage. I would love to see them do something. I don't know if it'll ever happen, but this is a great conclusion if this is the last one we'll get from the standpoint of original material. You see John Oliva, the original singer, come back to sing on this album and not just once in a while. We talked about him singing on Beethoven's Last Night yesterday with, the Mephistopheles role and stuff like that. And so it was good to see him, come and do a full album. You have some really good tunes on here. Stay With Me a While, I Seek Power, Morphine Child, which is ridiculously good. And it's funny because the guitar player, Chris Caffrey, who is just an awesome guy, he's great with his fans. He puts up great solo material. He did an album a few years back, and one of the songs on there was called Why. And I heard the riff, I'm like, God, that sounds familiar. It sounds a lot like Morphine Child. And so I reached out to him and asked him if I'm hearing things or is that true? And he said, no, it's the way it is. He wrote the riff for Morphine Child and was kind of paying homage to that and Why. And it's kind of neat when people, now do their solo stuff and kind of put those twists and turns in their music from something they did several years before. But overall, a really good, strong rocker heavy metal album. And, I really hope that someday they'll put something out. We'll see. But I wanted to point this out. Number 1 for 2001, Iced Earth Horror Show, and not so much because I want you guys to listen to Iced Earth per se, but more about it's called Horror Show. And basically, this is where our two worlds collide of loving music and loving movies come together. This album is basically based on horror films, right? The opener is called Wolf, which is about, the werewolf. The next song, Damien's, about The Omen. And then you have songs about Dracula, Frankenstein, Jack the Ripper, which we just talked about in From Hell. So another connection there from our films to music. Jekyll and Hyde. You have Creature of the Black Lagoon. And then it ends with Phantom Opera Ghost, which is the Phantom of the Opera. And it has a female singer as Christine, and it goes back and forth. So you kind of have that operatic feel of the story with the heavy metal to end the album. They also did an instrumental called Transylvania on this, which is an Iron Maiden song, and it kind of fits really clean on this album, and it makes for an overall really strong listen. If you like the original Universal horror films and some of these other films, you need to check this out. It may be a little heavy for you, but if you read the lyrics and how they put it together, it's really cool. And like I said, when you can put movies in music, it makes for a really, really, really strong record. And that's why Horror Show by Iced Earth is my number one for 2001. And like I said, on the film side, the legend, Denzel Washington, Training Day. All right, so that's it. We'll hit 2002 tomorrow. I appreciate the comments. Like I said, please subscribe if you haven't. And like I said, tomorrow, 2002.